Speak on the show 2022, the year's 2022, episode 8. We're here on Speak on it this morning, Saturday morning, 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific. Y'all ready? Let's go. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome to Speak On It. I'm your boy, R.W. Coolins. Welcome back. It's Saturday morning. Y'all know what time it is. First and foremost, giving honor to the God who allows me to come at you in this manner on a weekly basis. I'm back, y'all. Saturday morning. Took a hiatus last week. Had some things we had to take care of, but we're back. We're doing what we do. Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. R.W. Coolins, that's all you need. All social media platforms, R.W. Coolins, rwcoolins.com is the website. You can go there, click on the links, follow the links there. All social media platforms are R.W. Coolins. That's where you can find them, R.W. Coolins, on all social media platforms. Brian Hoodie, good morning, my brother. Good morning. Appreciate the support, my brother. Appreciate the support. R.W. Coolins over all social media platforms. This morning, we're broadcasting live on YouTube and Facebook as usual. You can go there after the show, Spreaker.com or Apple iTunes. And I noticed on Apple iTunes, Speak on the Show is what you need to search. Speak on the Show, not R.W. Coolins, but on Apple iTunes, it's Speak on the Show. I'll try to change that as we go. But if you want to listen to the audio after the fact through Apple iTunes, Speak on the Show, Spreaker.com, type in R.W. Coolins, should come up with no problem if you want to listen to the audio after the fact. Call-in number. Let's get another good morning out of the way. Good morning. Michelle Long, good morning. Good morning. Appreciate the support. Good morning. 844-904-2665. That's 844-904-2665. No matter what the situation is, let your voice be heard. All we ask is this, that you say what you mean and mean what you say. If you decide to call into the show, if you make a comment about something we're talking about, that's what we do here on the Speak on the Show as we continue to grow this show. Share it to other folks, share it to your page, do what you do with other shows that you may listen to, get some more listenership, add some more family members to the Speak on the Show family. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to build on what we got going on. Gary Burns, good morning, my brother. Good morning. Appreciate the support. Spring, y'all. Spring is here. We got to set spring forward. Set the clocks forward tonight. Don't forget, set the clocks forward 1 hour tonight. Daylight savings time. We got longer days, some won't go down to about 6:30, 7 o'clock, somewhere in there. So you can get out there on your grill and do what you do. Pandemic, mask mandates are reducing in most places. Most places you don't have to wear them unless you choose to wear them. Airline flights, places like that, you still got to wear them. But just be cognizant of where you're at, your surroundings and everything like this, because the pandemic is not over. And even though the mask mandates have been changed, the pandemic is still amongst us. I seen an article where in China, in the area where this supposedly started at, they're shutting it down again. They're putting people in lockdown over there because they're having another outbreak of something. Not sure what it is, but I just happened to glance at that the other day. So let's go on and get into this show. Let's get into it. Now, I wasn't here last week. I was gone. Hopefully y'all missed me as much as I missed y'all. But there was a lot of things going on, and I was back on the East Coast, celebrating with some family about a great accomplishment for someone in the family. My niece graduated nursing school, so we want to give her a round of applause. And it was a struggle. She fought through. She made it through. She accomplished what she wanted to accomplish. So bigger things are in sight for her. But back when I was there, let me go back. Before I left, I seen all these things on the news about this truckers going to DC just to protest about the pandemic and the gas prices, the mask mandates, anything you can think about, they get looped this all together. So I seen everybody up on these overpasses with the flags up and, truckers blowing the horns and everything. They were on their way heading to DC to protest. Kind of like what they were doing in Canada. But what threw me about it was that the more I seen it, and then when I was back on the East Coast and I seen them coming in through Hagerstown up on the I-70 and everything, and I seen them coming through and going down in the DC area and everything, what struck me as to be odd with the protesting was the fact they had American flags flying, everything that, but I also seen flags of Trump 2024, Trump this, Trump that. So my biggest thing is, what was the big protest about? I'm still a little confused about that, because here's where, for me, and y'all hear me say it, the water gets muddy for me. You're protesting the gas prices, but some of these truckers drove from all over the United States to head to DC with no loads, but you're complaining about gas prices. So you wasted gas to drive all the way to DC. Now, I understand the concept of what you want to do, but you can't complain about the gas prices if you're just using gas all willy-nilly. Let's just be honest. But you drove all the way to DC. You didn't go into DC. You didn't go down into DC. You rode around the beltway of DC, which still throws me off to why you would do that. You're just driving around the beltway. And they had a Senator Ted Cruz. You know, y'all's friend Ted Cruz was in one of the trucks with the trucker the other day. I think it was Tuesday, maybe. And he's riding around the beltway with him. But I'm trying to understand, for my own edification, exactly what this was all about, because I didn't see any big impact. You know, traffic in DC is traffic. I mean, I don't care. On the beltway is traffic. But they said there was some holdups here, they didn't disrupt it the way they thought they were going to. I'm just curious on what they were trying to get out of it, what they did get out of it, or if the meaning and the purpose of it was something that maybe was bigger than me that I didn't understand. If anybody knows anything, chime in, help me understand, because I'm a little confused. I'm a little confused about them wasting gas to go there just to ride around the beltway. Just me. You know, you draw your own conclusions. But also in the news, and this one's kind of Brittany Griner. I don't know if a lot of people know who Brittany Griner is. A WNBA player. She's damn good at WNBA player. And she was arrested in Russia. While this Ukraine-Russia thing is going on, she was arrested over a month ago. And she was arrested because she had cannabis oil in her luggage, is what she allegedly had. They say she's facing up to 10 years in prison in Russia because of having this, and they said it was smuggling significant amounts of a narcotic substance into Russia. I bring this up because I'm hoping and I'm praying that this doesn't turn out to be something that's based on politics now that she's in custody over there because everything is going on. And I'm also hoping that it doesn't turn out the way that the Otto Warmbier situation turned out. Everybody remembers Otto Warmbier. If you don't, let me refresh your memory. He was the one in North Korea. A young college student went over there on a trip that was booked through China, went over there, tried to take some propaganda off the wall to basically he stole something and was trying to bring it back. They arrested him, put him in jail, hard labor and everything. But by the time he was released, he was in such ill health, he ended up dying within days after he made it back to the United States. I don't bring that up out of fear that this will happen to Brittany Griner. I'm just hoping that it doesn't end up in this manner of everything that went on with that case. Now, mind you, they brought up the fact that she's a part of the LGBT community. Russia looks down very much on that community in Russia. So they're worried about her welfare as far as her lifestyle and things like that. Now, mind you, Brittany Griner has played in Russia in the offseason of the WNBA for many years. So they're wondering why now she got it. Because I'm a true believer. If she had it in her suitcase this time, 9 times out of 10, she had it in her suitcase before. What I would tell everybody is things that are legal here in the United States aren't legal all over the world. Cannabis, you got out here in Las Vegas, you got cannabis stores on every corner. That doesn't make it legal everywhere you go. When you go on your little vacations overseas, go on your cruises, things like that, the things you take with you, you better be cognizant that these things could cause problems because you like indulge in certain things. Every country does not accept and receive the fact that just because the United States is doing that, they're going to accept it for what it is and what is legal here. You need to be cognizant of that before you start heading out of here with these cannabis oils and different things like that in your luggage, thinking that it's going to be okay because it's okay here. Just a public service announcement to let you know. So let's get into this. Marjorie Taylor Greene and Representative Paul Gosar Marjorie Taylor Greene, and Representative Paul Gosar. Sharice Joseph, good morning. Good morning. Appreciate support. So this week, sometime this week, these two representatives. Now I want you to listen to me real close when I tell you this. Representative Paul Gosar, Republican from Arizona, Marjorie Taylor Greene, a Republican from Georgia. They both attended. Well, let me just say that they both spoke. One gave a keynote address, the other one spoke at a white nationalist event. I don't think y'all heard me. Two representatives of Congress, one in the Congress, one in the Senate, spoke. One was a keynote speaker and one other one just spoke at a white nationalist event in Arizona. I want to say it was Arizona. And it was hosted by a person named Nick Fuentes. And he's far from a household name in the United States, and all things considered, that's a good thing. He is, after all, a radical who's called for a homeland for white people, who's engaged in Holocaust denialism, who rallied rioters outside the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, and whose YouTube page was permanently suspended for promoting hate speech. So this Nick Fuentes set this thing up. He set this up. Jack Pennington, good morning, bro. Good morning. Appreciate your support. Nick Fuentes set this up. He invited two Republican Party people, two Republican representatives, one from Georgia, one from Arizona, to speak at this, and they accepted and they went. Now, I'm not the brightest light bulb in the socket, as I always tell y'all. But if you know that this is a white nationalist event, and you choose to go knowing the background of Mr. Fuentes, why would you go speak at this unless you truly believe what it's all about? Because you can't come back to me, and it's just me, you can't come back after the fact talking about you didn't know who Nick Fuentes was and what he stood for. Because if somebody invites you to speak for something or speak at something, you're going to do your research before you go speak. That's number one. Number two, you can't come back later on and say, well, you didn't know it was this, or this, when your speech fed into the concept of what they wanted you to talk about at that place. We have people in this United States, in the Congress and the Senate, and I've said it many times, but in our judicial systems and all these different places around here where they say that there's no systemic racism or there's no racism in these systems and things like this. But then you have politically appointed people speaking at a white nationalist event, and there is no problems within the system, because it's not the system, it's the people in the system that cause these racism, systemic things, and all that accordingly. So my question would be, good morning, OT, appreciate the support, bro. My question is, how can you have two sitting politicians who openly go and speak at this event, and there's no consequences to their actions? Because I'm going to say this. Anyone who has ever, from our community, associated with, been seen with, taken pictures with, spoke with, interacted with the Reverend Minister Louis Farrakhan has been vilified, has been looked down on. I mean, and I'll go back again, and I always bring this up. You go back to when they made President Obama, candidate Obama at the time, distance himself from Reverend Jeremiah Wright, because he said, not God bless America, God damn America. Y'all remember it? But they made him distance himself from that. But these two spoke at this event, and there's been no consequences. Does this say more about our political system? Does it say more about the people that were voting into our politics? Or does it say more about the fact that this type of mentality, this type of, cause that they want to stand on, this hill they want to die on, is embedded in certain people that we put in these positions who continue to spread this hate? Which one is it? This is where I say, and I'll continue to say, we need to pay attention to who we're electing into these offices. We need to pay attention to these people that are running for legislative positions. We need to pay attention to the people and what they're saying, not only once they're elected, but before they get elected. There's enough time between elections where we can do our research rather than just going in there and checking R or checking D because that's the party that you support. I don't get it. I don't get it. And then there was Republicans that were asked about this that had no comment. There were Republicans who were asked about this who had no comment. There were other folks who may not be Republicans. They had no comment. What does that say? What does that say? But in the meantime, in spite of those two, in spite of those two, and whoever they were speaking to, March 7th, Monday, March 7th, the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act passed unanimously in the U.S. Senate. Let me read that again because I talked about this a while ago. The Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act passed unanimously in the U.S. Senate on Monday, March 7th. Long time coming. And the article says, after more than 120 years since the first lynching bill was introduced in Congress, the Terrorist Act will finally be regarded as a federal hate crime. On March 7th, the U.S. Senate voted to approve the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act of 2022. The bill is expected to be signed by President Biden later this week. And this is a comment. Lynching is a long-standing and uniquely American weapon of racial terror that has for decades been used to maintain the white hierarchy. Illinois Rep. Bobby Rush, a Democrat from Illinois, the lead sponsor of the bill, wrote in a March 7th statement. Unanimous Senate passage of the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act sends a clear and emphatic message that our nation will no longer ignore this shameful chapter of our history, and that the full force of the U.S. federal government will always be brought to bear against those who commit this heinous act. According to the NAACP, 4,743 lynchings were recorded between 1882 and 1968, although some historians believe that number is higher. Of course it's higher. Of course it's higher. There's no need to say that historians believe it is higher. We know it, you know it, they all know it. 4,743 lynchings were recorded between, watch this, 1882 and 1968. Now, you know that number's low. Let's just be real about it. And to think that these numbers were recorded all the way up until 1968. I was born in 1966. Lynchings are still going on, have still been going on. It's just as there been no anti-lynching crime bill in place. Attempts at outlawing lynching in Congress have been attempted, watch this now, but failed for generations. January 20th of 1900 was when the first lynching bill was introduced in Congress, but nearly a quarter of the way through the 21st century, legislators finally criminalized it. I want you to think about that now. Between 1882 and 1968, they had 4,743 lynchings, right? Numbers higher as far as I'm concerned. Back in January 20th of 1900 was when the first lynching bill was introduced in Congress. 2022 is when the anti-lynching bill has finally been passed in this country. Land of the free, home of the brave. 1900 to 2022 is how long it took to pass this bill from the first time it was brought up. And it says, after more than 200 failed attempts to outlaw lynching, Congress is finally succeeding in taking the long overdue action by passing the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act. Every U.S. senator, including 50 Republican members, voted to approve the bill. It was passed overwhelmingly in the House with a 422-3 vote. The new legislation makes it possible to prosecute a crime as a lynching when a conspiracy to commit a hate crime results in death or serious bodily injury. The maximum sentence for those found guilty of breaking it is 30 years in federal prison. Now, I want you to think about this. The first time this was brought up to be a bill, an act, was 1900. 200 times it was brought up between then and 2022, and they all failed. And now it is finally passed unanimously, well, 422-3. Emmett Till, everybody knows the story of Emmett Till and what happened to him. I'm not going to rehash it. You know, that was in August of 1955. August of 1955 was when the heinous act of what they did to Emmett Till happened. This is 2022. And out of 200 times of bringing this bill to the Congress, this is the first time it has passed. 1900 was the first time. 2022 is when it finally gets done. 200 times it was brought up, even after the fact of what happened to Emmett Till in 1955. What took so long? Why did it take so long? And as I mentioned on this show before, we had that anti-Asian hate crime bill passed with flying colors, first time it was ever presented. But after 200 tries with the history of what lynching was done in this country, we finally got a Emmett Till anti-lynching bill passed. You know, we can applaud, we can rejoice, we can be happy that something like this is finally passed. But I will say again, what took so long? Why did it take so long? And why now? Why now? I'm going to be facetious when I say this. The year is 2022. It's an election year. Would that play a part in it? Because it seems like when election years come around, certain things get through that never got through before. I'm just, this is just my visuals. You judge it how you want, but I'm just saying. From what I know, from what I understand, from what I've read, why now? Why now? I don't know. Y'all help me out. Help me out. Had to drink some water, chokes me up. Same focus. Let's get this same focus thing going on. This week we all know what's going on over in Ukraine and with the Russian invasion and everything, the war, whatever you want to label it. But this is from Joy Reid of MSNBC. And she said, as the world watches the devastation unfolding in Ukraine, nearly 4,000 miles away, another crisis is deepening that we don't hear much about in the United States. And that is the war in Yemen. Since 2015, I want y'all to pay attention to this. Since 2015, a Saudi Arabia-led coalition backed by the United States has dropped bombs in Yemen in order to repel Houthi rebels, which had taken over the country with support from Iran. As the opposing forces continue to battle for control of the country, the destruction has led to widespread hunger, disease, and displacement. I'll tell you, because we was property. Yeah, you don't make laws for property. You just put it on a spreadsheet, inventory it every once in a while, make sure it's accountable for, and you move on. But I digress. Let me get back. 4 million Yemenis have been forced to flee their homes. Reid continued. Currently, 2 million Ukrainians have fled their country in the last 2 weeks, according to the United Nations. Meanwhile, the Saudi-led attempt to expel Houthi rebels from Yemen for the last 6 years has led to Yemen becoming the site of the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. Roughly 80% of the population requires humanitarian aid, according to the Human Rights Act. Half of all Yemeni children are experiencing irreversible stunted growth, according to a 2019 report from the International Committee of the Red Cross. The Saudi-led bombing campaign has been aided by the United States, the UK, and France. Now, what we're seeing in Ukraine is absolutely the worst humanitarian crisis that Europe has seen in decades. But we haven't witnessed the same type of solidarity for the Yemenis as we do for the Ukrainians. Joy Reid continued. Joy Reid went a step further, and she shared clips of other journalists referring to Ukrainians as having blue eyes and blonde hair. Reid illustrated the implicit and in some cases explicit ways that reporters have revealed their biases in what's worthy of media coverage. Pointing out what many people have already expressed on social media, Joy Reid questioned whether the international reaction to Russia's unprovoked attack on Ukraine would have been as profound if Russia had attacked a non-white, non-Christian nation like it attacked Syria. Crisis remain in countries like Ethiopia, Africa's second most populous country. For the past year, an ongoing civil war between Ethiopian government and the rebel forces in the country's Tigray region have resulted in more than 2 million people displaced and an increasing lack of food or other basic necessities. Meanwhile, even as African and Asian refugees fleeing Ukraine report instances of racism and segregation from Ukrainian soldiers, the world's support for Ukraine's independence remains strong. Rather than calling for less attention on the Russia-Ukraine, however, Joy Reid simply asked that her media colleagues give the same level of attention to conflicts and crises in other parts of the world. And this is what she said. This was her last quote. There's a lot of soul searching that we need to do in Western media about why some wars and lives seem to matter more than others, and why some refugees get the welcome mat while others get the wall. Now, I bring that up for this reason. I've seen this, and I'm thinking about what's going on in Ukraine right now and all the media coverage and how we have reporters, media on the ground, embedded in Ukraine with the missiles flying overhead and all these different things. Understood. It's news. You had to report it. But I'm going to ask a question, because when I read this article from Joy Reid, it really made me jump out. It really jumped out at me, because I'm going to ask this question. When is the last time that you heard about, and you probably heard about, some of these things going on in Ethiopia, over in Africa, on the African continent, where these wars are being fought between different tribes, or whatever you want to call, those type things? And when have you seen any journalist embedded in Africa watching these things progress as they go on and be reported like what's going on in Ukraine and Russia? Now, a lot of people will say, well, the importance of what Ukraine offers and what Russia offers as far as oil and different. I get that. But let's leave the oil and the products alone. And let's talk about life of a people who are being killed. You heard me read about what's going on in Yemen, excuse me, the Yemenis people. But we don't hear about that because we're part of it. The United States is part of what's going on in Yemen. But the Ukraine-Russia thing is at the headlines every day. You turn on CNN, you turn on Fox, you turn on MSNBC, you turn on your local news. They're still talking about what's going on in Ukraine. They're talking about the war, what the losses are, what's going on, who's fighting back, what the impact is on our inflation because of the oil and the gas and all these type things, the inflation that is affecting us because of what's going on over there. But nobody's worried about the lives being lost in Africa or Yemeni or all these other places where there's conflicts going on. Why? Because if you recall, Africa has some of the, biggest surpluses of products in the world. But we only worry about it when we need it. Now, I'm not trying to say that we shouldn't be concerned about Ukraine. I don't want anybody to take it that way. All I'm saying is, just like Joy Reid said after I read the article, let's use the same focus in other parts of the country, in other parts of the world, for people that may not have blue eyes, as some reporters have, reported. And let's get into this other part of what's going on in Ukraine, or what went on in Ukraine when this and before the bombs started dropping. As war erupts between the two European nations, people living in Ukraine are in a frenzy to escape to neighboring countries. However, reports released over the weekend show African students and other people of color experiencing racism during their attempts to flee. There are videos on social media of Black Ukrainians and other immigrants being barred from boarding trains, with Ukrainian law enforcement giving access to white people first. Students are posting live footage of having guns drawn on them while trying to cross the Ukraine-Poland border. It pretty much looks like the final hours before Titanic sank, when the lower class patrons were left to fend for themselves and met with aggression when they were only trying to survive. It's crazy, but not surprising that in all the chaos, Ukrainians still have time to discriminate against melanated people. And one can certainly argue that this is a one-off, highly sensitive situation, and the actions of a few people shouldn't reflect the attitude of an entire country. We hear that over and over again here in the United States as well. The actions of a few should not reflect what the whole country's about. But who's standing up for these Africans who are there, who were fine being there, going to school, studying, working, doing whatever they had to do while they were there. But now that there's a crisis and people are trying to flee for their safety, get to the back. You can't get on this train. Not because of who they are, but because of what they look like. And while we have this compassion for what's going on in Ukraine, you have to dig deeper to find stories like this, because you see the videos, but it's not headline news about racism during a war per se, during an invasion per se. So when we talk about these things, not only in the United States, but worldwide, about how racism is embedded in a lot of things that are going around this world and in this country alone, people get upset when we want to talk about it, but it's on display. It's in our face. There's a war going on. People are trying to flee, and they're preventing people with a melanin content like mine not to be able to get on trains to leave the country, being stopped at the border to flee from what's going on. Why? Why? But racism doesn't exist in the United States or anywhere. So they say. And you can, somebody put in an argument and say, well, that's not racism. That's people trying to live. That's people trying to survive. But when you're specifically alienating the people from being able to flee a country that is about to be in a war because of the way they look, you can't just sweep the racism aspect under the rug. It's time to stop this. I remember when I was stationed in Italy years ago, and I seen a lot of Africans there in Italy, and they were looked down on and treated badly and stuff. And you see these things in different countries. It happens in Europe, in the UK, happens in France. I seen it when I went to France. I see it in all these different places where melanin content considers you to be a second-class citizen. And I wrote this down here, and I'm going to get into this, and I wasn't going to go too deep into this, but I'm going to get into this. Denial is the heartbeat of racism. Denial is the heartbeat of racism. Anybody agree? Disagree? Denial is the heartbeat of racism, because as much as you deny it, that's what keeps the pulse of it going. We have to recognize these things and talk about these things, but everybody wants to sweep it under the rug like it doesn't happen. But we're seeing it in front of our own eyes when it comes about survival. People are trying to survive. And I can't flee from what's going on because of how I look, because of my melanin content. What is that about? Denial is the heartbeat of racism. Racism, let me give you the Webster Dictionary. Prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism directed against a person or people on the basis of their membership in a particular racial or ethnic group, typically one that is a minority or marginalized. That's racism. Now let's talk about the other one, because I got 3 isms I'm going to talk about right now. And I'm going off a little bit, but classism, prejudice against or in favor of people belonging to a particular social class. Classism. Colorism, prejudice or discrimination against individuals with a dark skin tone, typically among people of the same ethnic or racial group. There's 3 isms I just gave you. All of them, each one of those definitions start with prejudice. And as I said in this quote that I found, denial is the heartbeat of racism. I don't want anybody ever to tell me that racism isn't alive and well. You can deny it all you want. But when you see things like this happening in other countries, not only in the United States of America, but in other countries, where a war is about to pop off, someone's invading another country, and the people that look like me can't flee quickly enough because of their melanin content, and people take a priority for the ones that have the blue eyes, as was reported in that article, that they should get precedence of fleeing the country before me or the people that look like me, only because I don't look like them. And then you have people at the border stopping me from getting into another country because I'm fleeing a war-torn country. This sounds like the people that are trying to get across from Mexico into the United States. It's just on another continent. What's the difference? Down there, it's a wall. Over there, it's a war. But denial. Let's get back to the denial. We can talk about denial when we talk about the anti-lynching bill I just talked about that they just passed after 200 times of trying. When's the last time you heard of someone of non-color being lynched? I'll wait. Oh, I thought somebody said something. Denial is the heartbeat of racism. Now, one of these other articles I found, just dealing with the Africans in Ukraine that are trying to flee. You have women in Ukraine, African women, trying to flee the country, and they have set up something that is similar to the Underground Railroad. Let's think about this for a minute. The year is 2022. There's an invasion going on in Ukraine by Russia. You have people from Africa that have been in that country, providing to the economy of that country, working, studying, doing whatever they do in that country. And now that all hell done broke loose, let's just keep it real. Now that all hell done broke loose, they can't flee like the normal citizens, getting on trains, walking to the borders, being allowed into the other countries. These people have had to set up something similar to Harriet Tubman's Underground Railroad in 2022. Yeah. Discrimination and outright racist claims against Ukrainian officials have caused many Black people still in Ukraine to re-strategize their exodus from the war-torn country. African citizens, in particular students, have reported incidents of racial discrimination and abuse at the Ukrainian border with Poland. These reports have included beatings, being denied entry to trains, or simply being left stranded in border towns as white Ukrainian refugees escape and leave them behind. Jack Pennington, I have Go Feed Lives. I really enjoyed your show today. Keep telling the truth, educating. Appreciate that, bro. Feed them pigs and them cows out there, my brother. Appreciate you tuning in. So you got people being beaten, pushed aside, being denied entry into trains, and being put to, per se, the back of the bus, which they can't even get on the bus to flee a country at the border. According to NBC News, Mrs. Oshie, let me just put it Osho, Mrs. Osho, because I can't pronounce her first name, Mrs. Osho, 31, reached the Polish border the day after Russia invaded Ukraine. Osho, who's from Nigeria, returned to Ternopil in Western Ukraine, where he's, it's a sir, I'm sorry. He returned to Western Ukraine, where he's remained in a safe zone for the past week. He's helped shelter people in underground bunkers, driven them to borders, and provided money through a fundraiser. In total, he said he and a friend have assisted some 200 people. Mr. Osho has relied heavily on Instagram, where people across the country have reached out to ask for money and transportation. I'm sorry, it was Mr. Osho, not Mrs. But this Mr. Osho, 31 years old, got to a certain location and decided to go back and help people cross any way he can do it, because he knows what they're dealing with. Along with Mr. Osho, a trio of women, Corinne Sky, Ms. Koiko, and Ms. Daly, formed Black Women for Black Lives to provide nearby Africans and Caribbeans with information on the safest routes. Listen to this now. To provide information on the safest routes through areas where they might face discrimination while trying to escape. Black Women for Black Lives. They had to create a movement in the middle of an invasion in order to assist people and give them the safest routes to get from what's going on in Ukraine to be able to cross the border into another country, a safe zone per se, rather than being allowed to get on a train that they've stood in line to get on and be driven across the line just like everybody else. Another group of Black women started the Black in Ukraine group chat on Telegram, a messaging app which has facilitated communication for more than 4,500 Black people in the country and coordinated with one another for the bare necessities of safety and transportation. We created a document that the students were able to refer to find where the borders were, which borders were safe, and at which borders Black people had experienced racism, Daly said. It became a guide that included a list of accommodations, a list of drivers, contacts for when students were crossing over. 2022. 2022. And in the middle of an invasion of Russia going into Ukraine, African people on that continent, or in that state, whatever you want to call it, in Ukraine, have had to come up with their own way of being able to get out of the country safely, to come up with certain borders crossings that were safe for them to come through because of how they look. And we're still in this denial that racism doesn't exist. 2022, I'm gonna say it again, 2022, and we have a modern day, internet-based underground railroad going on in Ukraine for the Africans that reside in Ukraine to escape what is happening around them. Somebody help me understand this. Please. Whether wading through water in the Underground Railroad or navigating America using the Green Book, historically, Black people have had to be highly perceptive, fast on our feet, succinct communicators, and expertly agile as a means of survival. It's a lesson passed down from generation to generation, just like the popular African proverb says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. I don't get it. We talk about the things that go on in this United States of America. We don't accept everything that goes on. We know there's pockets of these different things that go on around us, and we're judged by certain things, about how we look, where we live, how much money we have, all these different things that go on. But we're still able, to a certain extent, practice the freedoms of being in this country. These Africans in Ukraine who have had to establish and create, excuse me, y'all, my hands itchy, an underground railroad per se, in this day and age. And we sit back and we see these things and we ask ourselves, what is really going on? In the middle of a per se invasion, war, whichever one you want to label it at this point. Innocent civilians are trying to flee, and they're separating them or denying them access, transportation, food, anything you can think of that you may need when you're fleeing a situation. And they got to come up with their own way. See, when we get upset and we talk about what happened at the border of Mexico, when the people from Brazil made it up to the border that were darker complected than the normal Mexicans that were at the border that they were trying to hold off, or the Haitians that they said made it to the border and they were denied access, treated differently. All the different things we talk about when we talk about the wall that they want to put up, this and wall they want to do that. You have to really truly ask yourself. We talk about these borders because there's no wall in Canada. Let's just be real. There's no wall in Canada. But the wall at the southern border that someone's whole campaign was built on, and people can't see it for what it is the denial of the freedoms that you tell people that they can have by coming to the United States legally. See, put that in there, legally, which most of the people at the border, if they're coming through the border entrances, are trying to come in legally. They're not the ones coming across and on the sides of the border. They're the ones coming to the entry points to be accessed legally that are denied. These are the things that we see. These are things that we tend to overlook. These are the things that we are in denial about, that a lot of these things that are established are not established because of a policy that needs to be written. It's because of a policy that already has a long-standing purpose here in this country. The purpose of not allowing or dictating who will get the freedoms that the United States stands for. Whether you're fleeing a war-torn country or whether you're trying to come here to improve your life, becomes a selective process. Because I will say this, and some people get mad, when those planes come in from Europe, there's nobody there judging who's coming in and who has a visa, who overstays their visa. But we got the southern border because they're walking in, not flying in, where they're scrutinizing each and every person that comes in. But when they fly in on a plane, the scrutiny is a whole lot different. When they're driving across the border of Canada into the United States, the scrutiny is a whole lot different. Why is that? Racism, classism, colorism. Denial is the heartbeat of racism, no matter how you look at it. And as long as we keep denying that it exists, as long as we keep denying that it's in our systems because of the people that are embedded in our systems. See, the systems were created at a time when racism, slavery was the norm. Let's just be real. But over time, as much as we try to force that mentality out of the systems, there's people that have gotten into the systems that dictate the systems at this point that still have that mentality of denying people the freedoms that they choose to deny them. Not by what is written in the Constitution that all people, but what they feel in their heart that only certain people are allowed a certain freedoms in this country. Not only here, Ukraine, UK, France, Italy. I can go on. I can go on. But it's a conversation nobody wants to have. It's something nobody wants to talk about. And as much as we're talking about what's going on over there in Ukraine, how the people are being treated and people dying and the war going on and fighting and everything like that, this is something that needs to be identified and talked about. Because even when Ukraine and Russia come to some kind of conclusion of whatever they're going to do going forward and how they're going to go forward, what government's going to be in charge, those Africans that were affected by this will come back to work, be a student, but the next flare up, it'll be the same practice. Nothing will change because we don't address it. We don't address it because we don't want to talk about it. And unless you talk about it, the less you have to address. And by not addressing it, it's just bubbling under the surface for something like this to happen. God forbid if something happens on this soil again. Let's see how the reactions are. I found this other article on MSNBC, No Light, No Nothing, inside Louisiana's harshest juvenile lockup. Now this kind of, and I'm going to post this after the show, I think, because it's a long article. But we all know about the justice system and the juvenile justice system. The juvenile justice system is supposed to be different than the regular justice system as far as what you can do to juveniles, how you treat them, how to treat it, what you do to rehabilitate them. All those things are different than someone actually going to prison. But this article was published in partnership with ProPublica, a nonprofit newsroom that investigates abuses of power, and the Marshall Project, a nonprofit news organization covering the U.S. criminal justice system. In St. Martinville, Louisiana, lawyers and a judge gathered in the East Baton Rouge juvenile courtroom last October for an update on a teenager detained after joyriding in a stolen car. The teen appeared on the screen alongside a caseworker who stunned everyone by describing conditions in the lockup where he was held. The 15-year-old was being kept in round-the-clock solitary confinement. He was getting no education, in violation of state and federal law, nor was he getting the court-ordered substance abuse counseling, according to two defense attorneys present. And no one in the room that day, not the judge, not the prosecutor, not the defense lawyers, appeared to have heard of the facility where Louisiana's Office of Juvenile Justice was holding him. It's called the Acadiana Center for Youth at St. Martinsville. It was as if a secret prison had been opened up, one of the attorneys, Jack Harrison, said. I could see on the judge's face both shock and real anger. So let me break this down to you. In St. Martinsville, Louisiana, there's a juvenile correction facility that no one knew about. Let me say it again. No one knew about. This young man, 15-year-old man, was arrested for joyriding in a car, sentenced to juvenile detention. They sent him to St. Maryville. The only reason anybody knows about St. Maryville is because it was exposed around this young man's case. Mind you, how do you open a prison or juvenile detention center in any state, and the state, the judge, the lawyers, no one know anything about it? This is our system at work. Nobody knew anything about it. Somebody knew about it because somebody had to open it. Somebody had to fund it, and somebody had to start it. They had no idea how bad it was. Scrambling to respond to a wave of violence and escapes from other juvenile facilities, state officials quietly opened the high security lockup last summer to regain control of the most troubled teens in their care. Instead, they created a powder keg, according to dozens of interviews, photo and video footage, and hundreds of pages of incident reports, emergency response logs, emails, and education records. Though Louisiana policy considers solitary confinement for youth a rare last resort, and many other states have placed strict limits on it because of the psychological harm it causes, teens in the facility, some with serious mental illness, were locked alone in their cells for at least 23 hours a day for weeks on end. They were shackled with handcuffs and leg irons when let out to go shower. And they were given little more than meals slid through slots in their doors. Some teens took those brief moments of human contact to fling their feces and urine at the guards. So you have juveniles being held in a detention center or a juvenile correctional facility, per se, that no one knows about, being put in shackles, being held in solitary confinement for 23 hours a day, some with already mental illness, and nobody knew about this in Louisiana. But it said the Louisiana policy considers solitary confinement for youth a rare last resort. And many other states have placed strict limits on it because of the psychological harm it causes. Teens in this facility, some with serious mental illness. They went in with serious mental illness before they got there. And you put them in solitary confinement with no lights. You only let them out to shower. And when they're going to shower, you got them on shackles. Story after story Emerging from juvenile systems reveal that agencies around the country don't have a good handle on how to manage their most challenging youth. They're just throwing up their hands and saying, we've exhausted our options. We just don't know what to do. Louisiana holds about 350 youths, more than 80% of whom are Black, in secure facilities. Louisiana holds about 350 youths, more than 80% of whom are Black, in secure facilities. It has promised for decades to move its lockups towards a more therapeutic model, but like many states, it has failed to fully fund or commit to the new approach. That, combined with the debilitating staff turnover caused by low pay and dangerous conditions, has meant staff haven't been properly trained to prevent the violence and chaos that has erupted. Now, I'm not going to go too much forward into this, too much further into this, but I bring it up for a reason. When we talk about the justice system and how they put you in there and forget about you, the juvenile justice system has certain parameters that have to be done. They have to be given education. They can't be put in solitary confinement only in the worst case scenarios. This place that was open secretly had these young men in solitary confinement for months at a time with no lights in the whole facility. And then we wonder why we have people that go to jail. We have people that get incarcerated and they come out worse than what they went in. Because there is no rehabilitation for these people because they feel if they did a crime that they don't mean anything to this country. And I'll go back again to Brittney Griner. We don't know what her fate is going to be over there in Russia because we don't know how they treat people. We don't know, she's up for 10 years. Politicians are trying to work with them to see what they can work out for her. But if this is happening in the United States of America, where we say we have the most freedoms of any other country, what do you think happens in a country that you go to jail that doesn't have the freedoms that we have? If we see this in a juvenile facility here on the United States soil, and everybody says that they didn't know anything about this secret place opening up, and people being treated like that who are only 15, 16, 17 years old, what does that say about us as a country, let alone the state of Louisiana? See, we get caught up in what's going on around the world in these different countries. But we got our own issues that we're not even dealing with here in this United States of America. But we always hear when we start complaining about things here, the first thing they say is you got to understand and respect the freedoms that you have in this country. Like we don't. We respect them. But when you see things like this happening to youth that may have made a mistake. He was driving in a stolen car, joyride. He's going to come out of there a completely different person than when he went in. Now, people say, well, he shouldn't have been joyriding. He shouldn't have been doing this. Well, there's a lot of things we shouldn't have done when we were children. But guess what? We were able and given the opportunity to correct those wrongs, to become better people as we grow through life. How's he going to survive from that? How's he going to recover from that? Especially if he went in with a mental illness. See, we don't concentrate on that. All we concentrate on is they're in jail for a reason. We don't concentrate on the effects of what prison, juvenile detention facilities, and the guards that are there to control these facilities, what impact they have on the people that are in these places. But we don't worry about that. All we talk about is they're criminals, lock them up. Just how we do things. Just how we do things. I don't know. I don't know what we can do. But let's go and get into this. Mind, body, and soul is the year 2022. We're taking it one moment, each and every moment. 1,440 minutes we get in a day. We're taking it one moment at a time and enjoy the moment for what it has to offer. Today's Mind, Body, and Soul is a quote I found. It's something that I think we all need to reflect on and go back to in our own lives. And the quote says this: stop comparing your life to others. What's for you is for you. Stop comparing your life to others. What's for you is for you. You know, I always had this mindset that our life, our path is laid out for who we are before we're even born. From our inception, because God is in control. And I'm a true believer in this. So the path we're going to travel is already laid out. But everybody's path is different. You know, sometimes in life, we come to a crossroads where you got to make a left turn or a right turn. And that's called a decision. And sometimes that decision that we make, if we go left, could be a quick way around. But if we go right, could be a whole lot of trials and tribulations on that road. And the thing about it is, what happens when we make that left turn or we make that right turn, other people will judge that decision and hold you accountable to that decision by being less than what theirs is. And where we fall guilty of it is we start judging our path by somebody else's path. We have to get into the mindset that what is for me is for me. What is for you is for you. You can't continue to judge your life off of what someone else's accomplishments are that you haven't measured up to theirs. And you can't go ahead and put yourself on a pedestal and grading yourself off somebody else's failures. You have to judge your life off yours. And when you make that decision at that crossroad and you make that right turn, and like I said, it may take you off path a little bit, but you get right back on track. But you make that left turn and it goes all the way around, and you may go through some trials and tribulations for 2 to 3 years before you get back on the path that God had already had structured for you. That doesn't make you any different than anybody else. And you shouldn't compare everything you've gone through to somebody who hasn't gone through. God has made that path for you to travel because that's what he wants for you. Every decision you make may not be the right decision as far as other people see, but it's the right decision by what God has in store for you. Keep grinding, keep moving, keep progressing, and stop comparing your path. Stop comparing your life. Stop comparing your failures and stop comparing your accomplishments to those around you. What's for you is strictly for you, not for anybody else. Others will judge. Others will come out and say what they want to say. But it's up to you to understand, no matter what they say, no matter how they judge, God is the last person and the last decision maker in what happens in our lives. You have an impact, but God has the last word. Understand that, live that, and live your life that way. Stop worrying about what the Joneses are doing or the other people on the other side of the street are doing or your coworkers are doing. That has no impact. It should not have any impact on you. Be you. Strive to be the best you. Stop worrying about others. What's for you is for you. Live it, love it, and learn from it. That's the best way to go about it. We're going to go ahead and wrap this up for today. I appreciate everybody tuning in. Glad to be back. This is the first show. We'll be back next week. We're going to hit you in the head with something else. You know, keep doing what we do and continue prospering and making this show the best it can be. I appreciate everybody tuning in. Do your thing. Keep doing what you do. And hey, at the end of the day, everything that's going on around in this world, God is still in control. Let me just put this out here. God is still in control. We can see it through our own visuals, but there's always a purpose. There's always a purpose for what God has in store. Sometimes what we don't realize is what is going on in this world is a wake-up call. God is trying to let us know that we have to put him first, because what we're doing right now ain't working. And until we put him first, these things will continue to go on in our lives, because the chaos is not created by God. It's created by man, because we lost focus of God. Let me get on my soapbox on that. But what I will tell you is this: keep God first in your life. Continue to do what you do, but keep God first. He'll guide you the right way, no matter what decision you're going to make. I appreciate y'all. As I always say before I sign off, love yourself, love one another, keep your head up, and most definitely keep your faith in God. I'll see y'all next week. I'll holler at y'all, and I'm out. Peace.